with my day job, my night job, my passion is travel. So thank you, Steffi, for asking me to do this. All of us traveled here in some way, shape, or form. I'm so happy to be back at DLD. How many of you are first-timers? Love to see it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I feel like I'm part of the DLD family. And to my right is Marc, who is running one of the businesses for DLD, which is Holidaycheck, the largest travel platform, German-speaking platform. And he will also continue to remind you about Holidaycheck, especially for all the German-speaking people here, because their reviews and content are honestly top-notch. And I've really brushed up on my German so that I can continue to read and know where I'm going to be traveling with the other Germans who follow the culture. And then we have Kathrin, who's with Airbnb, and she has a super exciting job where she is responsible for 25 countries. And of those, 24 are businesses, and her biggest challenge at these times also is running the 25th on sanctions. So as you can all imagine, she counts Russia in her portfolio of countries. So as we talk about beyond, we have the future of travel, and these are two amazing rock star people who both into these new jobs came early into hospitality pre-pandemic, not knowing that they would have a business that had one of the biggest consequences. So I want them to tell you a little bit about the resilience and the consequences of being part of an industry that basically came to a standstill. And how do you deal with that? Kathrin, you want to go first?
Yeah. So I joined Airbnb. So hi guys, pleasure to be here. I joined Airbnb in August 2019, so roughly 7 months before the pandemic. And then, as Marc can vouch, around March 15th, travel industry revenue slumped by 80%. It was terrible. But fast forward, and I think Airbnb was really lucky in recovering quite quickly. I have to say, Airbnb was born in a time of crisis. It was an economic crisis at that time. And I think if something's taught us these past 2 years it's that, out of crisis comes a lot of resilience and a lot of innovation and a lot of flexible mindset. And so I think, in a way, these past 2 years have been the best of my 24 working career.
Marc.
You managed to put a very positive spin on something that I think was scary.
It was
very much scary. I joined Holidaycheck in May 2020, so the pandemic had already started, and the question was, how does the company survive? And I think on my second day, the then CFO, Marcus, and I think he's sitting there if I see the light correctly, said to me, look, Marc, we're going to release an ad hoc release tomorrow saying we have negative revenues in the first quarter. And I thought this is the prank for new incoming board members at Holidaycheck, that you get told you have negative revenues. At some point, they start shutting down all my microphones here. I probably talk too much. It was not a prank. We had negative revenues, and if anyone from SAP is here, actually, you can have negative revenues in SAP, which surprised me. It was that day that I came to the realization that nothing will be like before for the next months. And like every travel company, I think big or small, during all of 2020, the question was not what you do, but how you survive. And as you said, I think a lot of resilience comes out of this, and we took this as a great chance to learn, to adapt, and to remodify how we come out of the crisis post-pandemic. And it was a great experience, though I have to say, and that's this part we two don't share, I'm not quite sure I would like to live through it again. But we certainly learned something. Or?
A lot, actually.
Marc, will you talk to the audience about who your demographic is? Because it's so interesting that both of you have a diverse user base, but also some commonality. You're catering to the German audience. You're focusing on culture. And it's not just for travel in Germany, but it's really family vacations. And as we all see, we all want to get back whether it's to take a holiday to bring people together, or we want to live, work, play a little bit differently from how we're now looking at that recipe. So could you share that?
So to answer that question, we first have to say what Holidaycheck really is. Holidaycheck is sort of the referee in the travel market in Germany. We are a UGC company, so users write reviews about hotels, destinations. We collect millions of these reviews per year, and people come to us to read whether their expected holiday will be a good one or a bad one, what to expect from a hotel, whether the advertisement picture is actually similar to the reality that you find in that place. And this is the reason why we are so relevant. More than 80% of Germans visit Holidaycheck at some point throughout their planning phase. So we are a platform for everyone. If we then look at the user group, and this might be a slight difference to Airbnb, we're probably the middle of Germany. We have everything from the single that earns the first couple of euros to the family, to people spending quite a bit of money on their vacation. But the vast majority of our users that book also a trip with us is the typical average German. It could be working for BMW, could be working for Audi, could be working in the chemical industry. A lot of them have a Monday to Friday job, and they will go on vacation once a year. And this is why we are so important. This vacation has to fit. By the way, it's always the woman booking. So if she messes it up, she has a family complaining. I don't want to take that responsibility. And we make her life a bit easier by telling her what to expect.
Thank you. Kathrin, Airbnb was a savior to...
Quick one, who has been using Airbnb? Who's a host? Oh, fantastic, thank you. So target group, Airbnb, millennials, younger Gen X, I'd say, and then Gen Zs. And what makes this audience so interesting is that, it's a bit daring, but I think observing how this target group travels are the first signals how travel changes. And travel does change. The pandemic has induced, I probably would call it a paradigm shift in travel. So this makes this target group really interesting to observe and to have as a customer, really.
Now, how have you seen that paradigm shift happen? Are people traveling to different sorts of places? Is it the same major market cities, or have you seen a difference, Kathrin, in your venues?
So the reason why we believe this is a paradigm shift in travel, and all of you in a way can relate, is that out of a sudden people are not tethered anymore to an office, or many millions around the globe in the workforce are not tethered to an office anymore 5 days a week. And what happens is that travel, work, and life blend in a way we haven't seen before at all. This doesn't make that people out of a sudden travel completely differently. Let's take Germans, they're creatures of habits, 70% outbound, 30% domestic. This has to be the case for decades and decades. But what we're seeing in the booking data are first signals that people start to travel differently. So there is a broader range of travel use cases. To give an example, 20% of the nights booked on Airbnb globally, and it's the same for my countries, are so-called long-term stays, 28 days and more. And this is not only digital nomads, it's also, and it's really the growth numbers are amazing, it's also families. So people travel longer, they stay longer. We do see signals that tell us that rural travel becomes more important. So if I compare this, what we do is 2022 numbers compared to the baseline year 2019. So we have a 60% growth in rural nights booked. So people don't necessarily go to the cities. The cities have recovered though. What we're also seeing is an interest in cultural travel. So to give you an example, we have 45,000 listings on Airbnb that are a cultural site. It could be a castle. It could be an old manor. It could be a lighthouse. It could be a converted church. And also, same period, we've seen 60% increase in cultural and heritage travel. And so these are just a couple of trends where we are seeing that travel changes.
Marc, where are you seeing the trends? And also, how about the spend as a German people and a culture?
I totally agree with what you described, but I couldn't disagree more at the same time. I think what we see is that the future of travel is more travel, and a much more diverse way of traveling. I don't see what you describe eating up any of the share of the typical leisure travel that Germans do. I think it will be additive, because what you describe is this crowd. These are people, the people who work for Holidaycheck. They might go to Greece to do vacation for a month, and they very often will stay in an Airbnb. A lot of people, the vast majority, does not have remote work. They'll have to be in a shop on a Monday morning, and they cannot leave Friday at 11 o'clock because they have a dentist appointment. These people are fixed to summer holidays, to Easter holidays, and they want the guarantee it's good weather. And actually what you just described, culture, adventure, a church, it's the opposite. They don't want an adventure. They want 2 weeks of guaranteed fun, good drinks, sun, beach, what we guarantee. And I also completely agree, because also these people, and a mixture of them, will add and at some point do the church as an additional thing. They might do an additional Easter vacation. But I think we will see the future of travel will be more travel. We will see a growth in that sector. And you will grow it a lot, but I don't think you will eat up on the hotel industry.
There's room for both of us, I guess.
I agree on that one.
Great. How about if we talk a little bit about sustainability in each of your jobs? How are you looking at that, and what are you solving for, and where do you see the growth happening around there?
Yeah. So sustainability, the way we look at it for Airbnb is, it sounds simplistic. It's a complex topic, and no one has really found a solution in travel, yet we have to act. So at Airbnb, we're looking in different options. We're currently collaborating with hosts. We launched this program in France and the UK. And we're handing out grants to hosts on Airbnb to make their home an energy-efficient home. It doesn't work in all markets. Let's take the German market, for example, which is a very renters-heavy market. France and UK are much more sort of owned property, so hosts can directly invest in their home. But the first results are very promising. So that's one way of acting on sustainability and saying, let's make the accommodation per se much more energy efficient. We are currently, it starts with simple things, and that's a learning too. Simple things in our case is that globally the host community reached out, and we have these host meetups regularly with our, I think, 4 million hosts around the globe. And they were like, guys, we are most worried about our guests not being responsible energy consumers. Can you help us? Yes, we can. So as simple as it sounds, we launched now in many markets energy-saving guidelines to our guests. This can range from leaflets to stickers in the bathroom. And our guests are really embracing it. They're saying, thank you for reminding me. Most of us want to do good, but you just need the education to do so.
I think that the advent of things like Airbnb will do a lot of good things, because you can do earthbound travel, you can visit closer locations, but we also need to face it as an industry. Sustainability is a topic that will probably have a more dramatic effect than COVID had, except it will take much, much more time, and hence we are all not panicking yet. But if you look at the pure statistics, Nature has done a study, published a study. Global tourism is responsible for 8% of the global CO2 emission, travel and tourism. That is a huge, huge chunk of CO2 emission, and we cannot neglect that as an industry because we want profit. On the other hand, we simply don't have a simple solution. Again, and I want to remind all of us, we are not the middle of Germany. We could all agree, let's compensate flights. Let's maybe make flights very, very expensive. Most of us in this room would not care. We would go less, but we would still go. A lot of people right now are priced out of their vacation because of inflation already. If you would double the flight price, they cannot go on vacation. Do we want a society where the top 10% fly wherever they want and the remaining 90% get to work in the factory and the vacation is on their balcony? That's not a world I want. I don't have the answer. I think it has to start from the accommodation, and the hotel industry is doing a lot on saving energy, which, by the way, given the energy prices, is a win-win. I think the flight problem is a problem. The industry doesn't have an answer. But given the size of our industry, we have to come up with an answer.
So, Marc, what new features or how are you bolstering the content and reviews? Because you're so rich in content, and people, from what you shared with me, really have a 6-month runway at least to plan their holidays at Holidaycheck.
So it's the content we have is basically the core of our business and what we fight and defend in any possible way, because what we live from is the authenticity. This is basically like, you don't want any hosts who have locations that are not good for the guests and vice versa. For us, it's the content. If we have faked descriptions of what to expect from a vacation, we might ruin the one vacation that a person has. Obviously, what helps us is we have a lot. For most hotels, we have a lot. It gets hard to fake them. But we also spend human resources, a lot of them, to manually check. We use artificial intelligence, and we see whether there's a disproportion between incoming things and how things are rated. The interesting thing, because this is future of travel, is, however, also how content is actually also extending the value chain of the travel. I think travel will never go away. It's the one thing you can actually not digitalize. I'm not afraid of the metaverse. Sitting on the beach in Creta is just irreplaceable. By the way, if you want to book holidaycheck.de, it's irreplaceable. You cannot digitalize the actual experience of the beach and the sun. But what you just described, you take 6 months, is actually what users do. They start now booking their summer vacation. And the interesting thing is, they not necessarily start from what they can afford. They start from a dreaming phase. They spend days looking at, what can I do here, what can I do there. And this is already part of the experience. And again, as I said, I think the travel sector will expand. It will also virtually expand. People will spend more time maybe using AR, VR to look what to expect. And they might spend hours in this virtual world on the pictures on Holidaycheck to see how the Maldives would be. And they end up booking Mallorca. So holiday will be longer, but it will always be a physical thing. I don't think I answered your question, no?
You did. I think that we all learned a lot from your answer. And Kathrin, back to that, I mean, it's a very emotional decision, travel, and taking a holiday and going beyond. What did you learn coming out of the pandemic? I know you had mentioned to me that there were a lot of lonely people out there. So how have you changed up or made broader offerings around experiences or groups and demographics to come together?
Yeah, so, looking at the time before the pandemic, and the data is specifically poignant for the US. It's probably the same around the globe. People were talking already about an epidemic of loneliness, right? And this only amplified during the pandemic. I think something like, 1 in 5 Americans says they are lonely. 1 in 3 seniors say that are lonely, but can you guess the most lonely or the loneliest age group? Who are the loneliest people on planet United States according to surveys? Actually, it's teenage girls. So 60% of people between 18 and 25, answer to surveys, recent surveys, they are lonely. And what it also shows, and I think the data is very telling, not only for the US, but it's definitely true for around the world, people are spending much more time alone than they used to. And so I totally agree with what Marc says. At Airbnb, we believe that travel is a fundamental way of working on loneliness. It's about reconnecting. It's about emotions. It's about traveling with friends. It's about traveling with families. And so for us, this is, looking at these data, we deep down really truly believe that building out travel and offering the broadest range possible, affordable for everyone, is something that will help overcome loneliness. It's a big topic. And so the accommodation is an experience in itself. And I was just picking up on something you said, Marc, with regard to, they search a lot, but then they book Mallorca. What I find interesting, looking at data at Airbnb, and it's a different target group, right? It is, as I said, millennials, Gen Zs, and young Gen X. What we see is that with the right way of inspiration, and Airbnb launched categories. It's like storefront categories, and we launched a completely overhauled way of searching for accommodation, which is called I'm Flexible. Okay, we could have come up with a more original name. But people using these features, they show a really interesting behavior. So if you look how they book, so compared to the regular bookers on Airbnb, 30% more book outside of seasonal peaks. Great, right? The second observation we made is that if you take the top 200 cities that were the top 200 before the pandemic, 20% of bookings were accounted for by these destinations. They only accounted for something like 14%. That might sound neglectable to you, but it is a signal that people start, there is a travel dispersion. And by giving them the right inspiration, people go there. They go to those places that might not have been on the usual list. It might not be always Mallorca anymore. This still all ties back to this reconnection with friends and family and overcoming loneliness. But ultimately, this is the experience in itself. It's not 100% the location, but it's the experience, the accommodation, and the way you travel, and the kind of connections you make that matter, at least to the users of Airbnb.
Fascinating.
I'm, by the way, a bit jealous. Your search is really good.
Thank you, Marc.
Marc, would you talk about, Germany is the third largest travel group, and Holidaycheck is so relevant because it's so culturally in German, for Germans, not just in Germany. How do you keep that real? How do you keep it relevant? And how do you keep iterating to make it better and better?
It's daily work. I think the core is what I said. We keep our reviews very authentic. And this is something we don't mess with, even if a hotel is willing to pay us a lot of money. The authenticity is what is fueling our brand. And I think as long as we have that, we will stay relevant.
Fantastic. Just to share something as we have our last sort of storytelling by Kathrin, I wanted to let you all know that Kathrin was responsible for moving all of the refugees from the Ukraine into housing, and pretty amazing, phenomenal experience. Would you take a thank you from us and also tell us a little bit about that experience, and thank you so much for all the good work you've been doing.
I'll pass it on to our host. So some of you might have known, heard about it. The Ukraine is part of my 25 countries. So the 25th is the Russia. I have sanctions, not a business. The other one is the Ukraine. And Airbnb has always been, for the past 10 years, engaged in working with the hosts on the platform to provide temporary housing to people in need. The last one was Afghanistan. And then Brian, when the war broke out, he texted me and said, look, I want to up our commitment. I want to do 5 times more than we've ever done. Are you up for it? I was super scared. My entire team was scared. The entire EMEA team was scared. But fast forward, because of the generosity of our hosts, because they offered their housing the first 30 days, which is the frontline response after sort of the countries can take over, most of the hosts offered their accommodation for free. A lot of them also said, look, I can't afford offering for free. I lost 2 years of revenue, but I'm willing to offer for a discount. And Airbnb paid for it. From our own money, from the employees' money, we donated. We had a lot of very generous donators to finance this program. And 2 things today. I'm really proud to say that we were able to house more than 120,000 people by now. That makes me really proud. And the second is, we still need every support we can have. So if you are a host, consider signing up for Airbnb.org. If you think you want to house a refugee for 30 days, become a new host. You don't need to become a commercial sort of host or a home share on Airbnb. Sign up on Airbnb.org.
Thank you both, and thank you all for being part of our session.